artificial intelligence has gone from science fiction to almost everyday reality now, and it's changing our lives in really profound ways. I think, personally speaking, it's one of the most exciting developments that I've encountered at Wired. And I'm curious just to turn it over to both of you and to talk about this.
Joey's the expert, so I'm going to defer to him. But my general observation, as you said, is that it is seeping into our lives in all sorts of ways that we just don't notice. And part of the reason is because the way we think about AI is colored by popular culture and by science fiction. And I know it's a familiar distinction to a lot of your readers between general AI and specialized AI. Specialized AI is really the stuff that we've been doing for quite some time. We're just getting better and better at it, and that is figuring out, using algorithms, whether computers can figure out increasingly complex tasks. And we're seeing that happen in every aspect of our lives, from medicine to transportation to how electricity is distributed. And it promises to create a vastly more productive and efficient economy. And if properly harnessed, can generate enormous prosperity for people, opportunity for people, can cure diseases that we haven't seen before, can make us safer because it eliminates inherent human error in a lot of work. But it also has some downsides that we're going to have to figure out in terms of, if not eliminating jobs, requiring people to think differently about their occupations. It could increase inequality, and we've seen that in technology generally and globalization. It can suppress wages. And so we're going to have to develop new social constructs in order to embrace fully and optimize this new technology. In science fiction, what you hear about is generalized AI, right? So computers start getting smarter than we are and eventually conclude that we're not all that useful, and then
off we go.
Off we go, or either they're, drugging us and keeping us fat and happy, or we're in the Matrix.
We're living in a simulation now.
Or we're living in a simulation now. And Joey said there's a lot more. My impression, based on talking to my top science advisors, is that we're still a reasonably long way away from that kind of generalized AI. It's worth thinking about only because it stretches our imaginations and it gets us to think about what our core values and issues of choice and free will that actually do have some significant applications for specialized AI. But generally speaking, that's probably not the thing that we need to worry about the most right now. We need to figure out how do we get what's already happening around us, but is just going to be more and more incorporated in our daily lives. How do we get that right?
I think this may upset some of my students at MIT, but one of the concerns that I have about AI is it's been a predominantly male gang of kids, mostly white, who were more comfortable talking to computers and human beings that have been building the core computer science around AI. And not all of them, but a lot of them feel that if they could just make that science fiction general AI, we wouldn't have to worry about all the messy stuff like politics and society. And there's almost like a church of this belief in headquartered in Silicon Valley. And so that's a concern, because I think a lot of people figure that the machines will just figure it all out.
Right.
And they underestimate the difficulty. And I feel like this is the year that artificial intelligence becomes not just a computer science problem, but something that the White House, that I've been working very closely with a friar in the Dominican order,
right,
who's trying to understand Bitcoin encryption and AI
right,
from the perspective of the Catholics. And so I think that a lot of other people need to be involved. And the difficulty has been that the computer science community, they're not an easy gang to talk to. And so, and I think, the White House here, your team and yourself, I mean, you've probably gotten your head around this more than any other anybody else in history, and it's good timing because I think everybody needs to understand it, and I think that's a key piece. I think and we use at the Media Lab, we're using the term extended intelligence because we don't think it's going to be us and an AI. That AI, just like Google, just like everything, will be built into the laws, into the government, into society, and how that behaves is important. And it's like the internet. And when we were doing a lot of the early work on the internet, we thought it would just solve democracy.
Right.
That democracy would just get better. But now you've got
That didn't work
these.
out so well.
It didn't work out so well. And we do think that we can push the pendulum back.
How we think about the interface between humans and machines, I think is something that I know Joyce thought a lot about. This is where the idea of extended intelligence makes a lot of sense. It also is probably the better way of thinking about it for our economy and jobs, because people worry that, well, are we going to get into a situation where a machine's just doing everything? And one of the promising aspects of AI is it turns out that, for example, even in playing chess, a computer with a human oftentimes can do better than just the computer. Well, think about that application, broadly to a lot of disciplines. What we want to be able to do is develop systems that are open enough, transparent enough that human judgment, human imagination, creativity are still intruding, are still active, but a lot of the routine stuff is happening day to day. And in some ways, that's just analogous to, how we use calculators, right? It's an extension of our intelligence, but it's a simple enough one that it doesn't feel as threatening as it does, partly because we understand exactly what's going on. And with a lot of these systems, you start losing track of what are they doing? And I know that's a problem you've been thinking about a lot. For us to be successful in these areas, we really have to think through the economic implications, because most people aren't spending a lot of time right now worrying about singularity. They are worrying about, wow, is my job going to be replaced by a machine? And I tend to be on the optimistic side that historically we've absorbed new technologies, and people find that new jobs are created and they migrate and our standards of living generally go up. I do think that we may be in a slightly different period now simply because of the pervasive applicability of AI and other technologies, where high skill folks do very well in these systems. They can leverage their talents, they can interface with machines to extend their reach, their sales, their products, their services. Low-wage, low-skill individuals become more and more redundant, and their jobs may not be replaced, but wages are suppressed. And if we are going to successfully manage this transition, we are going to have a societal conversation about how do we manage that? How are we training and ensuring the economy is inclusive? If in fact we're producing more than ever, but more and more of it's going to a small group at the top, how do we make sure that folks have a living income? What does it mean in terms of us supporting things like the arts or culture, or making sure our veterans are getting cared for? So the social compact has to accommodate these new technologies, and our economic models have to accommodate them. The good news is that's not going to happen overnight. Let's say that's a 20, 30-year process. If we're making good decisions now, then we can build the runways so that by the time AI is fully incorporated into our economic life, people welcome it as opposed to reject it. But we can't assume that. And if we continue on current trends, you're going to continue to see these populist movements, both on the left and the right, that believe that technology, globalization, AI, the guys who are off on their own, staring at a computer screen trying to figure this stuff out, that all of that is threatening to the day-to-day lives of ordinary people and the values that they cherish and notions of community. And we have to guard against that. That starts with making sure the economic implications are worked out.
It's actually, though, non-intuitive which jobs get displaced, because I would bet that if you had a computer that understood the medical system and was very good at diagnostics, the resident nurse or the pharmacist
is the least likely to
be and maybe the amount of school they have to go to is just a community college instead of medical school. And my rule of thumb is if the person looks like they're doing work that a robot or an AI could do, they're going to be more likely to displace. And there's actually a very high level jobs, maybe some categories of lawyers or auditors that might disappear, whereas a lot of the service businesses, the arts, I think that things that involve things that computers just aren't well suited for. And I think to President Obama's point, I think that we have some time, and I don't know what you think about universal basic income, but as we start to see people getting displaced, there's also this idea of work provides the structure for people, it provides the purpose. And so can we look at other models like academia or the arts where people have purpose or people who take care of kids at home, and can we somehow, because we don't calculate moms into GDP, it's crazy, right? So I think one of the problems is there's this general notion sort of on Wall Street, how can he be so smart, he doesn't have any money, right? And now going into academia, I realize there are a lot of smart people with no money. And so I think that also this ties into the values of society, because as we start to see other work, that may actually be viable work. It just isn't viewed as work. Right?
Well, you're exactly right. And that's what I mean by redesigning the social compact. Now, whether a universal income is the right model, is that going to be accepted by a broad base of people? That's a debate that we'll be having over the next 10 years, next 20 years. And you're also right that the jobs that are going to be displaced by AI are not just low-skill service jobs. They might be high-skilled jobs, but ones that are repeatable and computers can do. What is indisputable, though, is that as AI gets further incorporated and the society potentially gets wealthier, that the link between production and distribution, how much you work and how much you make, gets further and further attenuated because the computers are doing a lot of the work. And as a consequence, we then have to make some tougher decisions. We already have this problem. It's not as hypercharged as it's going to be. We underpay teachers despite the fact that that's a really hard job that's really hard for a computer to do well, to replace a really good teacher. But we don't value teachers because it used to be primarily women's work, or because there are a whole host of reasons why we don't. For us to re-examine what we value, what we collectively are willing to pay for, whether it's teachers, nurses, caregivers, moms, dads who stay at home, artists, all the things that are incredibly valuable to us, but right now don't rank high on the totem pole. That's a conversation that we need to begin to have. And Joey's identified, I think, the ways in which this could be solved. But it's going to require, I think, a new way of thinking, and that's not going to happen right away.
Well, I understand you are a Star Trek fan.
Absolutely.
That certainly was a show inspired, a utopian future inspired by technology. I'm curious, what about that show shaped your vision of an optimistic future?
I was a sucker for Star Trek when I was a kid. Even though when you look back, I think there are only 20 episodes, right? They just looped over and over again, but they were always fun to watch. What made the show, I think, lasting was it wasn't actually about technology. It was about values and human relationships. And which is why it didn't matter that the special effects were kind of cheesy and bad, right? They'd land on
anyone?
Yeah, or they'd land on the planet, and you remember there's all this paper mache boulders sitting there, but it didn't matter because it was really talking about a notion of a common humanity and a confidence in our ability to solve problems. And you know, a recent movie I think captured the same spirit, The Martian. I mentioned that as my favorite movie last year, not because it had a hugely complicated plot, but it showed a bunch of different people just trying to solve a problem and employing creativity and grit and hard work and having confidence that if it's out there, we can figure it out. And I do think that what I love most about America, this country, why it continues to attract people from all around the world for all the challenges that we face, is that spirit of, well, we can figure this out. And what I value most about science is this notion that we can figure this out. Well, we're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we're going to figure out why it didn't work, and then we're going to try something else. And we will revel in our mistakes because that is going to teach us how to ultimately crack the code on the thing that we're trying to solve. And if we ever lose that spirit, then we're going to, I think, lose what's essential about America and what I think is essential about being human.
Can I say one? Yeah,
Please.
the only thing I would add, I totally agree. I love the optimism, but I also think that it's amazingly, the Federation's very diverse, the crew's very diverse. It's a bunch of diverse group of people, and the bad guys aren't usually evil. They're just misguided or broken, and so it's a much more optimistic view of humans as well, you know, and than a lot of shows that are about, you know, superheroes or evil, and the struggles are kind of wonderfully sort of balanced.
Well, I think that's right. I think Star Trek, like any good story, says that we're all complicated and we all got a little bit of Spock and a little bit of Kirk and a little bit of Scotty and maybe some Klingon in us, right? But this is what I mean about figuring it out. Part of figuring it out is being able to work across barriers or differences. And look, there's a certain faith in rationality tempered by some humility, right? Which is true of the best art and the best science and you know, the best literature. You know, a sense that, you know, we possess these incredible minds that we should use, and we're still just scratching the surface on them, but we shouldn't get too cocky and remind ourselves that there's a lot of stuff we don't know.